In this tutorial, I want to talk to you about adding color to your artwork. Oftentimes, students will choose a different medium to add color to their artwork. So depending on whether you're doing crayons, colored pencils, markers, or oil pastel, the technique will vary. The great thing about marker is the vibrant color, and if you have a big solid shape, you can fill it in pretty quickly depending on the tip of your marker. With markers, you want to stay pretty directional and work in strokes that are even and next to each other, because sometimes where they overlap, you will see some variation. I try to keep almost one stroke next to the other when I'm doing marker and not overlap as much as possible. It's very difficult to blend. If I wanted to blend two colors, I can sort of blend them, but you can see a bit of a line. Another common material that everyone seems to have access to would be crayons. And crayons are great because they can come in so many colors. I'm going to take 3 colors that are analogous. They're next to each other on the color wheel. And I'm going to place them in the order of the color wheel. I'm going to go green to blue-green to blue. And I'm going to show you how I might attempt to blend it. So with crayon and with colored pencil, I like to keep the direction moving. Remember, with marker, I stayed in one direction and tried not to overlap. With crayon and colored pencil, you'll see that I like to slowly build up my layer. I'm not pressing too hard because I'm going to blend it to another color. And so I'm doing a technique called scumbling, and I'm going around and around and around in a controlled scribble. And I'm going to try to end it sort of in a not so straight way. I'm going to take the next color on the color wheel, which would be blue-green, and I'm going to do the same technique, and I'm going to overlap them where they come together. And again, now that I'm putting the blue-green over the green, I'm trying not to do it in such a straight way, because then it will look more gradual. It'll look like a gradual change from the green to the blue-green. Where I have overlapped the two, there's almost a different shade of blue-green. I can go back and forth with them so that you can't see where one ends and one begins. And I can also get brighter if I want to by increasing my pressure or adding more layers. I'm going to go into blue next. I'm doing the same thing. I'm scumbling, so I'm going in all different directions so I don't see like a line. And I'm overlapping my blue-green the same way I overlapped the green with the blue-green. The next material I'm going to try is probably the most popular among middle schoolers, and that's the colored pencil. Like crayons, they come in a lot of colors. Better than crayons, they're easy to sharpen, so they can get into those tight areas and you can get a nice fine tip when you need to do details. They are very similar in the technique to crayon, except you can erase a little bit. You can blend with an eraser a little bit. I'm doing some warm colors, mostly shades of pink and red. I like to, when I'm layering my colored pencils, I like to always start with my lightest color and do almost like a base coat. So I'm going to do that same scumbling technique, which is a controlled scribble, and I go around and around and around. And as I keep passing over in different directions, it's filling in my white spots. So I'm going to keep going around and around and around. And that's my first lightest value. If I want a darker pink there, instead of just increasing pressure from the beginning, I usually will increase pressure once I get a layer and I decide that for sure I want to go darker. because although you can erase a little bit, you can't totally remove colored pencil. So it's a lot easier to get darker as you go than it is to try to get lighter. I'm going to move on to a magenta, and I'm going to try to blend it in just like I did with the crayon. I'm going to do a similar technique, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to overlap where the two colors meet. If I want to get brighter, I'm going to keep layering over. So I'm going to build up my layers with colored pencil. Where they meet, I don't want an exact straight line because then I'll have a stripe. I want to kind of just have this one start to dissolve into that one and have this one sort of dissolve into this one. There. I'm going to go with a darker color here, and I honestly think this one is much darker. It's not really a natural progression from the last color to this one, and I wanted to do that on purpose so that you could see it's not always that easy to blend. The first two colors that I chose go really well together. So if I were to leave it like this, you can definitely see a line of where the two colors meet. So with this one, I'm definitely going to have to do some layering back and forth. It's a back and forth thing to get these two to blend. So I'm going to take my medium value here, and I'm going to put it into my darker red, and I'm going to go back and forth and back and forth. So I'm squinting, seeing some areas that need blending right in here. So I'll just work in between the values. Where one starts and one stops, I'll just work ever so lightly, adding a little of each until that looks more gradual. The last material I'd like to talk about is the oil pastel. Oil pastels are used probably least often of the materials, but I find that they're the easiest to do some cool effects with. They're messy, that's the downfall. They don't sharpen. You can get an X-Acto knife and kind of sharpen it. So sometimes it's tricky for small details, but boy, oh boy, are they easy to blend. With oil pastels, I tend to work in a scumbling or sometimes even like a cross-hatching technique too. But with oil pastels, I tend to press really hard. I'm really smudging it in that paper. And then I'm going to take the next color. And so I went from like a yellow orange to a regular orange. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm kind of smushing them into each other. I can take my finger as well and blend in between. I'm going to switch from orange to red. And that one has a little more of a definite color change right there. So I'm going to make sure I bring my red lightly into my orange, but then I'm going to take my orange and I'm going to go back into the red, and I'm kind of pushing the color back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until I've got a really nice blend from one to the next. In all three of these, I really try to not have it change in a stripe, because if you color it, and I'll show you, if you color it straight up and down and then switch to the next color and then switch to the next color, those are stripes. That should wrap up my 4 different color techniques.